Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to more Warhammer 40k lore, where today we're going to talk about Chaos Space Marines. We haven't talked about them anywhere near enough, or barely ever, frankly, which is unfortunate because there are quite a lot of interesting things surrounding the Chaos Space Marines, and we are going to start by, why are there even Chaos Space Marines around in 40k? As originally in their lore, every single Chaos Space Marine was a traitor from the Horus Heresy, but after 10,000 years of attrition, you'd think their numbers would be running dry, so clearly they have some way to replenish their numbers, and that is what we're going to talk about today. But first, this video is sponsored by Manscaped, purveyor of only the finest in male hygiene products like the lawnmower and his pretty little LED light for accurate trimming of the hedges. But now, Manscaped is taking it one step further with boxers. And, since I'm doing ads for them, I want to point out that technically, theoretically, kind of in a way, this makes me an underwear model. A frightening thought, to be sure, yet it does make a certain amount of sense. Whilst, of course, applying the ball deodorant and clearing the hedges on occasion is a good start, you gotta think long term here. And that means the best in boxers, to make sure that your balls are cupped in the gracious form of the Boxer 2.0. Because you know that when your underwear comes in a golden package, you get the best that's out there. And I can quite honestly say as well, these things are probably my new favorites too. So, if you're ready to upgrade your wardrobe, you can go to the link down in the description below. It will have my code there, which will give you a nice discount, and you can also purchase a 3-pack of Boxers 2.0 with a yet further discount as well. That is 20% off plus free international shipping, so definitely do go check it out, because your balls deserve the best. Now then, Chaos Space Marine reproduction. One of the pervier points of 40k lore, I suppose, but nevertheless, a very interesting and necessary one. As I mentioned, initially the lore behind the traitor Space Marines was that each and every single solitary one of them was a survivor of the Horus Heresy. Now, this had a lot of problems because, well, on the one hand, it was really damn cool to think that these ancient veterans, with hatred and passions aflame for 10,000 years, would still be fighting their eternal war even to this day. I remember a little lore blurb from, I'm fairly sure, one of the Chaos Space Marine codex, where a Chaos Space Marine is attacking a handful of loyalist Astartes, and he's commenting on how they are not as fast, not as skilled as those legionnaires he fought during the Horus Heresy. Is this the best that the Corpse Emperor has to offer now, he wonders, as he quite handily dispatches them. I quite liked this because it added an element of mythological grandeur to the Chaos Space Marines. They have memories of the time they fought titanic heroes in enormous half-forgotten conflicts. It made them feel bigger than they were. The problem was, of course, that on the actual tabletop, they were not 10 millennia old veterans. In fact, they were at best the equal to the loyalists and worst inferior to them in such respects as leadership, for example. And hey, it makes sense that these veterans, without their command structure, many of which have not seen their primarchs in tens of thousands of years, many of which are far more independent-minded, etc., will have a worse leadership score. But if they truly are 10,000-year-old veterans, plus all of the combat experience from the Great Crusade, they should have been at least superior fighters, if less disciplined. So this whole part of their lore has simply never gelled with their actual presence on the tabletop. And then, of course, there's the problems with how the hell are there even Chaos Space Marines still around? Even at the height of the Great Crusade, the legions only numbered a few 100,000 warriors apiece. And after the enormous casualties inflicted on the traitors during the Siege of Terra, followed by years, decades, centuries of bloody, violent retreats and pursuits towards the Eye of Terror, their numbers would have been severely diminished. Toss on another 10,000 years of attrition, and their numbers should certainly be diminished by now. This was a plot hole that GW eventually decided to address, at least in part, here and there, by allowing their writers to more or less go bananas with the Chaos Space Marines, to the point where today there's actually quite a few ways in which new Chaos Space Marines are created, or in which old ones are recycled. Their stats are still crap though, mind you. GW has never been particularly fond of Chaos Space Marine players, but we all have our cross to bear. But why is this even a problem to begin with? Why is it so difficult for the Chaos Space Marines to reproduce? Surely they can create new Chaos Space Marines just like the Loyalists create new Loyalists, right? I mean, they're within the Eye of Terror. Surely worlds inhospitable to human life, populated by ferocious predators, should be easy enough to come by. Place a couple dozen cities on it, and hopefully in a few generations you'll have a nice solid stock of aspirants that can then be implanted with traitor gene seed. And there's the kicker. The gene seed. Already during the Horus Heresy, the influence of the Dark Gods upon the traitor legions were beginning to degrade their gene seed, to the point where it was no longer usable for implantation in fresh aspirants. And a few thousand years spent stewing in the raw stuff of chaos in the Eye of Terror has not improved matters. Thusly, for lack of a better term, the Chaos Space Marines are infertile. And even if there were still Chaos Space Marines around today that had yet to have their gene seeds harvested, it would be so corrupted that there would be no point in even attempting to implant it within a new host. This corruption and degradation thus means that the only real way for the Chaos Space Marines to grow their numbers is via stealing Loyalist gene seed. Or, well, there are a couple of exceptions. Let us address the outliers first, and then we'll get to the biggest part of the video, the acquiring of Loyalist gene seed. Because whilst I did mention it is the only way, it is the only reliable way. There are, technically, theoretically, a couple others. One of which can be broadly described as Fabius Fuckery. As, of course, the old apothecary of the Emperor's Children is still out there somewhere, continuing his countless experiments to not just recreate, but to improve upon the God Emperor's greatest miracle, the creation of the Adeptus Astartes. Fabius Bile has been hard at work at this for 10,000 years now. Which says something, considering a certain someone else did it in a goddamn weekend, but details. Let's not get into call here. The point is, Fabius Bile is Chaos's foremost expert on the gene seed, on the progenoid glands, and the creation of the Astartes. And he has also near perfected the process of cloning. To the point that he not only routinely clones himself to escape death by transplanting his own brain into newer and newer bodies, but he even managed to clone a Primarch, Fulgrim, Though he was quite surprised with the result himself, as the Fulgrim clone, despite possessing all of the genetical memory of the original, was still pure, and wholeheartedly rejected everything that the traitor Primarch had done, which confused the hell out of Fabius, of course. Now, this is one of those idiotic plot messes that Black Library has written itself out of and then back into again over the course of the Horus Heresy. Because the Fulgrim clone being loyal is easily explained by the fact that he originally fell due to the influence of the Lear sword and being possessed by an actual demon, to the point that the Fulgrim that was in the Horus Heresy was not Fulgrim at all, but a demon prince, a Primarch in the most literal sense, a monster wearing Fulgrim's body. Therefore, of course, a clone of Fulgrim would be revolted by all of those things, since it would have the perspective and understanding and knowledge of what had happened to him. And then that goddamn book appeared, which undermined all of that and yet again messes up the entire timeline, as Fulgrim not only managed to wrest control of his body back from the demon, because he just figured it out, I guess. Oh, I hate that book so much. But of course that also means that Fulgrim, the actual Fulgrim, fully embraced chaos, to the point where he was even willing to learn from chaos to shackle the demon who had taken control of his body, and thus a perfect genetic clone of Fulgrim with all of his memories would literally be that same monstrous traitor Fulgrim. But let's not get into the mirror reflection. Let's not. Oh, that book makes my blood boil. Let's not. Okay, so the point is, Fabius Bile's expertise in cloning is, of course, an unbelievably invaluable asset to the Chaos Space Marines, as he's able to just straight up print new ones. Now, this does come with various drawbacks, like, for example, their progenoid glands will still be just as corrupted as always. Their gene seed will be just as corrupted as always. So it's not like they can print one, kill it, take the gene seed, implant it in a new one, and so on. Clones in the 41st millennium also, by the way, tend to have a wide variety of problems due to how the universe works, the same way that AI always decides that wiping out humanity, and life in general half the time, is the only way to protect against chaos. It is a universal rule of the universe, in the same way that clones, by and large, tend to meet unfortunate fates for one reason or the other. It is not a 100% universal role, but cloning is a measure of last resort for the traitor legions. A valuable asset, no doubt, but it would be even better if actual gene seed could be acquired, which is something else, of course, that Fabius Bile is pretty damn good at, as he is by far the best and most experienced apothecary, quote unquote, amongst the traitor legions. Though we then return to gene seed again, so let me also cover the other way in which Chaos Space Marines can replenish their numbers, or at the very least maintain them, and that is not Fabius fuckery, but warp fuckery. I'm sure many of you remember another famous Emperor's Children, Lucius the Eternal, who takes over the body of whoever kills him and transforms them into himself over time, granting him de facto immortality. And if the Chaos Gods could do that for Lucius, it stands to reason that they could do it for near any number of other Chaos Space Marines. There are also tales of Chaos Space Marines being rebirthed, essentially, as the Chaos Gods own their souls. It would be a small thing indeed for Nurgle or Zinch or Khorne or Slanesh to pluck their soul from the Immaterium and wrap them in a new body. We've also seen this in, for example, the Horus Heresy with the return of Grulgor as a walking form of pestilent plague. If the Chaos Gods wanted, they could, again, presumably do this for essentially anyone. The problem is, the Chaos Gods are exceedingly fickle and tend to not give two shits about the fates of their servants, and so very, 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 very rarely actually do this. It is, in other words, not a reliable way to replenish the ranks. So let us finally then get to the gene seed. Now, acquiring gene seed is not easy. In fact, it is unbelievably difficult. Some can be stolen from slain loyalist Astartes on the battlefield if their bodies can be secured, and if a Chaos Space Marine apothecary is nearby, and those are rare and few and far between as well, and tend to command a hefty price for their services. Fabius Bile, for example, has placed himself practically at the center of Chaos Space Marine society, as everyone is desperate for his services that he hands out very carefully as well, mind you, so as to not upset the delicate balance between the various power structures, as he learned his lesson the last time he pissed off Abaddon and his failure of a legion. Anywho, gene seed. How is it gathered? Well, as mentioned, one of the easiest ways, quote unquote, is to find and kill a bunch of loyalist space marines. Now, finding them is, well, it can be a very hard part, and it can be a relatively easy one. Do a big venture into the Imperium, raid some worlds, and odds are they'll find you. Now, whether or not you survive being found, that's one of those inevitable complications. Preferably, you would like to ambush the little loyalist bastards, which means you need to figure out where they are or where they are going ahead of time, so that you'll have the advantage of surprise and offense. Besides the obvious challenges of hunting space marines, the quote-unquote easiest way to garner gene seed also has another major drawback, namely the fact that it's very difficult to gain any real quantity of gene seed by doing this. Space Marine forces tend to be scattered across vast areas of the galaxy, and if they are to not expect you to be there so you can carry out an effective ambush, they're probably only going to be sending a couple squads at most, a company at the absolute most, whereas if you are engaged in an active war against major loyalist forces, including perhaps a chapter or two, you might not have the time to loot in peace, shall we say. And even if you somehow come across the absolute perfect circumstances, say for example the locating and ambushing of an Adeptus Astartes strike cruiser, you manage to disable it, you manage to capture the Enginorium, making sure that they can't destroy the ship, and you manage to kill all of the Space Marines aboard without damaging the gene seed with, bolt rounds, explosives, flamethrowers, all of the various other things that tend to occur during boarding actions, etc. Then you're looking at 100 to 200 units of gene seed, depending upon the veterancy of the crew and so on. Now, make no mistake, 200 units of gene seed is an enormous bounty to nearly any Chaos Space Marine warband, as it represents not just another 200 Chaos Space Marines, but as these are uncorrupted gene seed implanted into fresh recruits, there is every chance that at least one of the 2 progenoid glands of these new Chaos Space Marines will be harvestable in turn. As you will remember, Space Marines have 2 gene seeds within their body, one in the neck, which will have matured after about 5 years and can then be surgically removed, and one in the chest cavity, which is usually only removed after the death of the Space Marine. Thus, in theory, a warrior will not only be able to create his own replacement, he should also be able to create one further warrior. Now, in reality, of course, the rigors of combat often include severe injury, which can easily destroy one or possibly even both of the glands before they are ready to be harvested. And in the case of Chaos Space Marines that tend to spend extended periods within the warp, again, gene seed does not respond well to the corrupting taint of chaos. Nevertheless, 200 units of gene seed could potentially mean another few hundred warriors of chaos. But whilst that is a big number, we also have to take into account what it might have cost to acquire them. How many fully matured Chaos Space Marines were lost in the capture of the Loyalists' bodies? How many irreplaceable veterans were killed to replenish the ranks of those Chaos Space Marines? And the risk involved as well. Hunting Astartes is not a hazard-free sport, shall we say. Thus, in many cases, the risk often outweighs the reward. But killing the God Emperor's Angels of Death is not the only way in which gene seed can be procured. For example, gene seed is of course a physical thing. It must actually be transported from a location to another for a variety of reasons, like the tithe paid by loyalist chapters, where they send some of their gene seed to the Adeptus Mechanicus, both for routine checks against corruption and to make sure that there are always sizable storages of gene seed available should anything unfortunate happen. Say a chapter takes crippling casualties and do not have enough gene seed to replenish their ranks. They can petition the High Lords of Terror to have gene seed given to them so that they may begin recruiting again. Both the tithes and potential shipments of replacement gene seed will then have to be moved through the Imperium. Now, obviously, these shipments are beyond secret and beyond heavily guarded. I mean, again, we're talking about a problem here where killing Space Marines is the easiest solution, so that's the level we're talking about. But if somehow a Chaos Warlord was able to learn about the route that a shipment of gene seed would take, attacking an Imperial Navy escorted convoy might be easier than taking on Astartes, and in all due likelihood, the quantity of gene seed will be much, much vaster as well. Although the true prize, of course, is one of several tremendous gene seed storages scattered throughout the Imperium. As obviously, not all gene seed is stored in the same location. That would be a disaster waiting to happen. Instead, the gene seed is stored in hyper-secure and hyper-secretive locations, usually far, far, far out of the way, and ridiculously heavily guarded, fortified, and garrisoned. One of the best examples of this is found in the Storm of Iron novel, which, by the way, is Graham McNeil's by far finest work. Like, it is an excellent novel, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I literally read the whole thing in a single night because I could not put it down. It is an amazing book, and again, the best that Graham McNeil has ever produced, in my opinion. Not to go into any spoilers here, but the planet Hydra Caudatus is home to an enormous Imperial bastion, a huge network of defenses, fortresses, pillboxes, orbital defenses, massive numbers of Imperial Guard, etc., etc. It would be considered by almost all attackers to be an impossible objective. And that really is the point of any gene seed storage area, obviously. To be as impenetrable as possible. Yet, if such a nut can be cracked, the bounty within is immeasurable, and it will make whatever warband manages to do so unfathomably wealthy and influential in Chaos circles. Though, the problem for the Chaos Space Marines do not even end there. Even if they do manage to get their hands on Gene Seed, and in considerable enough quantities to really think about ramping up numbers, they're still lacking the second part of the formula. The actual human that will be implanted with the Gene Seed, of course. Now, you might think that this would be simple enough. Again, the Eye of Terror is theoretically infinite, and any manner of world can be created inside of the realms of chaos with nothing more than a thought, and they can be made to be whatever world the reigning chaos deity demands of it. Surely recruits would be plentiful everywhere. Not so. You remember that we talked about the corruption of the Chaos Warrior's gene seed. Well, you can probably imagine that any human raised within the Eye of Terror is gonna have all of those problems and more. So any gene seed implanted within a human raised inside of the Eye of Terror is going to be done so long before it produces any progenoid glands for harvesting, and that's only if it actually works, and the odds are not great. Now, there are ways around this, with, for example, another of Graham McNeil's creations, the Demon Quilaba. Which, see, part of me wants to describe it. Part of me would have done so happily had this been the YouTube of 4, 5, or 10 years ago. Today, I think I'm just gonna say you're gonna have to Google that one. Yeah, it's, let me just put it like this. Graham McNeil is a sick fuck. And I say that with all due respect and admiration. But yes, the Demon Quilaba is one way to get around the problems of creating Space Marines within the Eye of Terror using less than desirable stock. If, however, you are not in possession of such horrors, then the best way of acquiring a new Chaos Space Marines to be is to simply abduct them from the Imperium. Many is perhaps an overstatement, but some Chaos Space Marine warbands maintain allies, allegiances, infiltrations, perhaps more accurately, with worlds within the Imperium, certain barbaric tribes or cults that they can draw new applicants from. Others simply raid Imperial worlds and steal a bunch of people that they think look functional or worthy. Others, yet again, just simply grab whatever civilians they can find in the correct age range and bring them back to be implanted with the gene seed. The failure rate of this is, of course, astronomical, as normally aspirants need to go through extensive selection processes, both to make sure that they are the best, the fittest, and the most overall well-suited for the implantation, but also biological and medical screenings to try and reduce the possibility of something going terribly wrong. The Chaos Space Marines not giving too much of a crap about who actually gets to be one of them. They don't care too much for all of that nonsense. They do have some advances in medical technology as well, via the Dark Mechanicus, that have managed to remove some of the problems, whilst no doubt creating a whole host of new ones. I am also sure that the Demon Collaba is not the only warp invention created specifically to make it easier to create new Chaos Space Marines. It would not surprise me at all to learn that certain warbands perhaps have made alliances with Dark Magi, or even straight up demons, to make some sort of roundabout way to increase their odds a bit. The problem is, however, the more chaos you throw at this, the more corruption you're also incurring, and thus the more danger to the gene seed. Ideally, the implantation process would take place in real space, somewhere within the Imperium or a safe area of chaos-controlled space, to make sure that as little chaos corruption as possible will begin seeping into the gene seed and into the person being implanted until they are ready to fully begin growing and maturing their own progenoid glands. This is not always possible, of course, but again, ideally speaking. And well, there you have it then, the main ways in which the Chaos Space Marines replenish their ranks. Through Fabius fuckery, like cloning, or the creations of weird and disgusting things, or via warp fuckery, like a rebirth or the recreation of Chaos Space Marines, usually via the direct interference of the gods themselves, or the more usual way, the theft of gene seed, which can then be implanted into usually unwilling new hosts abducted from the Imperium. Not overall a particularly nice process, but it is the traitor legions we're talking about here, so no big surprise, I do suppose. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.